Peace, 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 peace. Let's see here. I'll get a couple of these other outlets started. Let's see if we can get it going. All right. Trying to get this one started now. All right, we're going to wait till a few people come on in real quick. I'm live on Facebook, live on TikTok. Facebook tripping right now. I don't know what's going on with it. Connect video source. There's video sources connected. No. So is it saying I'm live or no? Create chat. Yeah. So hopefully, let me see what's going on with this thing. So it says it's starting the live. All right. So we're going to trying to see what's happening here. Because we're going to, I've been seeing a lot of, just a lot of people talking about masculinity, femininity, gender roles, and all that type of stuff. So, I wanted to, do a live about it, to put it in its proper context, because most of what people are talking about is out of the context, out of the context of what it should be. We're talking about a lot of how people feel versus what things are, which, we gotta go back. This thing is tripping. Let me see here. Yeah, this thing is, what's up with this? Yeah, let me see. Multi 1080 Pro stream. Cool. Got it. Complete details. Let's see here. Do that. All right, let's see what that does. Go live. That's all I want to do here. Now, okay, cool. Now we're going on Facebook. All right, so let's talk about it. Yeah, I'm seeing, so many people are making posts, making videos about, masculinity, femininity, gender roles, how things are supposed to be, what's supposed to be done. This is how we're supposed to live our lives. This is what we're supposed to do. This is how a man is supposed to act. This is, how a woman, is supposed to do things. And everyone is saying that, right? But what I'm noticing is that what most people are saying doesn't really go along with any real narrative. And it lacks a true cultural understanding of what, um, gender roles and masculinity and femininity is actually defined. And it's also lacking in many cases an understanding of what true masculinity and what true femininity is. So, people are talking, right? But there's just not a lot of substance to it. And what happens is because of that, it continues to, mislead people into, thinking, hey, this is what, masculinity is. This is what femininity is, which causes more of a divide, continues to cause more of a divide than anything, because now you have people who are, talking on a very mundane level, about these things. And, of course, it's not going to jive with most people's spirits. You see why this thing is still tripping here. Yeah, I'm not sure why is this thing still tripping. We're gonna just let it rip. We're gonna let it rip. So one of the things that where I want to start with this discussion, and anyone is welcome, to come on the live with, their ending questions, disagree, agree, whatever, more than welcome to come on. But one of the things that we got to understand is that when we're talking about masculinity, when we're talking about femininity, in order to totally understand it on a mundane level, you also must understand it from its spiritual place. If you don't understand it from the spiritual place first, then your concepts of masculinity and femininity are always going to be off. It's always going to be a little jaded, because what you keep doing is acting as if everything is concrete in the mundane, right? So from a spiritual perspective, we have to first understand that there is no such thing as masculinity and femininity. It doesn't exist on the spiritual level. On no spiritual level, no spiritual plane do masculinity and femininity exist. It's an energy of one. It's not separate. It just is, right? And so when we get to the ethereal, when we understand the divine, let me see. Sure. How are you?
Привет.
Say it again.
I'm from.
Ah, where are you from?
Where from?
We're in the United States.
America.
Yes, America. Where are you at?
I'm from Russia.
Good to meet you. Did you have something you wanted to say about masculinity and femininity?
Играем?
Did you have something you wanted to say about masculinity and femininity?
Play.
Hmm.
Play battle.
Oh, I don't play. But thank you. So when we understand it on the ethereal, what is going on with this thing? Reload. Let's try it again. When we understand it on that level, on the ethereal level, as to what's going on, the energies are together. They're not separate. So when we think of the divine inhabits both. There's no separation there, right? And so because there's no separation there, what we're looking at, on the ethereal level is just a oneness. So then the question becomes, how did we get to the part where, the energies become separate? So as you study different ancient spiritual concepts, when you start to study, different, book spirituality and things of this nature, then what you'll notice, what you'll see is that we lost our spiritual connection. And when you start to study astrology, you'll see that in astrology, on the esoteric side of astrology, it's presented and understood that as the ethers began to vibrate slower, that we started to descend down, right? Now, that story will be told through astrology and astronomy, in us going through the different houses in the zodiac, also us going through the different signs, right? Each zodiac, or I should say the zodiac wheel is considered one full day. So that also goes to a part of the biblical scripture that, a day in the eyes of Jehovah or God, Allah, whatever, is like 1,000 years, right? That's going to this astrological and astronomical concept of understanding that each sign, right now we're in the sign of Aquarius, will stay in Aquarius about 2,156 years, 2,160 years. It takes 26,000 years to get through the complete zodiac cycle. When you understand the esoteric side of that, then the story, as it's explained to us through our ancestors, is that as we descended down, the masculine and feminine energies began to divide. Okay. When they began to divide, am I live on here or not on Facebook? I don't even know. Facebook tripping. Yeah, Facebook is tripping. I don't know what's going on with it. But anyway, so as we begin to divide, you'll start to see the divide, take place in Gemini. In Gemini, esoterically, it's understood that the feminine represents divine intuition, and the masculine at that point represents intellect, right? Divine intellect, and they're together. As we leave Gemini, okay, as in astrologically, on the esoteric side, as you leave Gemini, the feminine aspect of intuition becomes subjugated. Okay, and this is as we're falling spiritually. This is a story of the spiritual fall, and it's got to be understood in these concepts, because if you don't, again, you're going to keep putting out misinformation about what gender is, what masculinity and femininity is, and what gender roles are, if you don't understand this part of it. So as we began to fall, the story shows that we began to subjugate the feminine aspect. Now, that feminine aspect is also represented by the right hemisphere of our brain. So the disconnect from the right hemisphere of our brain, also the disconnect from the divine, is all a part of this subjugation of the feminine aspect within ourselves that's represented by the right hemisphere of our brain. And as we did that, we continue to disconnect and disconnect and disconnect from the divine, right? Now, as we're continuously disconnecting and falling, ethereally, falling spiritually, you'll see that we'll go into Cancer and Leo, right? Now, when you start to study even more esoteric information, you want to talk about the fact that at one time, everyone was androgynous, meaning one sex, and procreated asexually. And with asexual creation, you're basically creating a replica of yourself. Okay, and this was a divine ability that had to do with us spiritually still being connected to the divine. So because we were still so connected, we still was one as we keep going. Even as we're subjugating the feminine, we still hadn't completely lost the spiritual connection, right? Then as you continue to go through the zodiac wheel and the descent, you'll notice that when we get to Libra and Scorpio and things of this nature, that then we see the separation, the physical separation, the physical representation of the spiritual fall. And that manifests in the masculine and the feminine being no longer in one form, now split. And the split happens so that we can then come back together and understand the need and necessity for each other. During this split, though, the feminine aspect is still very much segregated, subjugated. And that becomes important to understand. So during this spiritual fall, the feminine is very much subjugated. Okay. And again, this coincides and correlates to the right hemisphere of the brain, which is why most people are completely disconnected from the right hemisphere of their brain now. That's why we use a very small portion of our brain, right? And so our dreams and things, our imagination all happen right hemisphere, but most people do not exist within the right hemisphere of their brains very often. We don't use them. This is where we manifest. This is when you're praying. Prayer is a right hemisphere brain activity. Drawing, Playing sports, involves both the right and the left, hemisphere of the brain, right? But we're not doing it that much. So why this becomes important to understand is because that's the truth of how we got here, right? Once we got to the place where the masculine and the feminine were separated, then the first individual or sex that was revered was the feminine, because we still were in a very high spiritual state at this point. So we looked at the woman and understood that um, because she was the incubator that life manifested through, that she becomes the first revered um, creature on the planet by us, because she was the gate, is the gate that all life comes through. So that's where you'll find that all of your ancient artifacts, your oldest ancient artifacts that are made, in reverence to a divine force, are made in the image of the woman. Even if as you go into ancient Hakupta, or what we call Egypt, you'll find that before that they attributed the divine force to being masculine, Ptah, that it was actually feminine first. Okay, you'll have to go back, because what they're presenting, the first, okay, was the first representation of understood to be the divine, right? And then as we begin to spiritually fall, spiritually decline, it changes. And we go through this every 26,000 years. There's a cycle, right? With that, we have to understand that when you go back and you look at, anytime you're studying ancient civilizations, when you read the Bible, the Quran, Torah, all of those things, most of the concepts that we have today of masculinity and femininity are reversed. And there's a reason why, though, we have to understand. What I want people to understand about what we see today is that culture now defines masculinity and femininity in the mundane. And on the third dimension level, on the mundane level, the concepts that everyone is talking about when it comes to masculinity and femininity are cultural. And what people are doing is that they're taking cultural concepts, cultural norms, and making them a universal rule, right? So people will say, well, the man is supposed to do this. Well, that's embedded based on culture, not necessarily masculinity and femininity. And those things are separate. The culture is saying what masculinity and femininity is in that culture, not necessarily having to do with masculinity and femininity. Let me explain. If when you look at, let's go into something that people know pretty easily, biblical history. You'll notice that in biblical history, most of the stories you find that the men are cooking. You'll also, if you pay attention to ancient stories or things of this nature, you'll find that the women were actually the ones in the marketplace. The women were in the marketplace. Okay, again, these things are important to understand because we're talking about culture. But the women dominated the marketplace. Well, the women dominated the marketplace because the marketplace was a feminine atmosphere. Women were there because they made clothing, they sold dye, um, jewelry, things of this nature. So women created things and then would sell them, and that was the marketplace. And so women dominated that. That was not a man's area. It was a woman's area. So everyone's mistresses and concubines and things of this nature would then meet in the marketplace. And so it was a feminine atmosphere. And the men stayed home and they did the hard labor. They dealt with tilling the land and turning the land and the crops and things of this nature. That was the hard labor. So the masculine dealt with that part. The feminine was in the marketplace, selling and gathering goods. So stay